The Shape of Water is our next movie here on this Love-athon, directed by Guillermo del Toro, who's known for making movies like Hellboy, Hellboy 2, Pan's Labyrinth. I really love Guillermo del Toro as a director. This movie was his Oscar-winning movie. This movie won the Oscar back when it came out. And although I didn't think this was the best movie of the year, I thought it was one of the top movies of that year. And I was more than happy to see Guillermo del Toro finally get the recognition he deserved. So this movie follows a woman as she works in a science laboratory. She's a custodian, basically. And as she's working in this facility, discovers she has this weird romantic relationship with a fucking fish monster. Of all things, she bonds with this fish monster. Now, this woman is deaf, and maybe that's why she connects with this fish monster a little more. But in the midst of all that, there's Michael Shannon. He tries to break up their relationship. And this whole movie kind of plays out like a modern retelling of Beauty and the Beast, or something like A Hunchback of Notre Dame, or something like that. But since it is directed by Guillermo del Toro, it is told for a more mature audience. That's what Guillermo del Toro, in my opinion, does best. He takes these fables, these fairy tale stories, and brings that awe-inspiring wonder and makes it so that an older audience can also feel those emotions, just like how I felt when I used to read these fables when I was a kid. And he's very good at doing that. And one thing I thought was very interesting about this movie, when it won the Oscar, I remember I don't watch the Oscars, I just look at the highlights. I think the Oscars are stupid. It's a stupid show, in my opinion. It's not a well-done show. Not discrediting the Oscars, obviously, just as far as a show goes. Ugh. Who watches the Oscars? Where was I going with this? Jeez. Yeah, I saw the clip of him winning Best Director, and he said that growing up, he always felt like an outsider. He always felt like a monster. He always thought that making movies about monsters and making movies about outcasts and bringing them more sympathy was reflective of his upbringing, of his childhood. And I thought that was a very interesting thing and not something that I initially took from his films. I feel like Tim Burton is a similar director where he grew up, he was probably more of an outcast, a little bit more of a weirdo, probably had a bit of an emo phase going on in his teen years. And his movies do reflect that because his movies as well are always about the sympathetic monster. Like a movie like Edward Scissorhands, for example, is about a sympathetic monster. So I thought that added a lot to my enjoyment of the film, just knowing that little piece of Guillermo del Toro trivia. If you haven't seen his Oscar speech, I suggest you watch it before watching this movie. It really adds to this movie, in my opinion. Yeah, I like it when people talk about film and talk about their accomplishments and talk about the cast and crew. I don't like it as much when there's like this shameless Disney plug, because it is on ABC. And I don't like it as much when there's like some LA billionaire that's talking to us about how this political thing is super important. Look, I watch the Oscars because I like movies. I don't want to see politics and Disney ads. But yeah, that's basically why I don't watch the Oscars. But anyway, watch Guillermo del Toro's Oscar speech before watching this movie. I think it will add a lot to the experience. So yeah, as I said before, this is basically a adult-oriented version of something like a Beauty and the Beast. And it really does work with that. One thing Guillermo del Toro always does well, that's present in all of his films, is the fact that he meshes practical effects with CG seamlessly. The fish monster, played by Doug Jones, as always. Doug Jones is a frequent collaborator with Guillermo del Toro when it comes to bringing his monsters to life. But he really works in this. He really has a rubber suit on, but it never feels out of place. And they do add some CG onto him to do some weird lighting and to like add blinking and stuff like that. And it really blends in this movie seamlessly. The set pieces in this are really fantastic as well. It's like a gloomy look at the 1950s, and this whole movie as well, I didn't mention, is an homage to 1950s sci-fi. Background about 1950s sci-fi. So in the 1950s, there was threats of an atomic war going on. This was in the midst of the Cold War. And a lot of people got paranoid about nuclear warfare and atomic energy. So a lot of the horror movies around the 1950s were surrounded by that fear. So you got movies like The Fly and just stuff like that about science gone wrong. And this movie is basically an homage to that. The facility she works at really feels like something from a 1950s sci-fi. And the monster basically looks like... he looks like Creature from the Black Lagoon, but that's not from the 50s. That's something else. But it gave me a lot of that energy from a 1950s sci-fi. And even the soundtrack, how it had that little whistling noise, is also a very prominent thing in 1950s sci-fi. But it's done more romantically in this movie. The relationship Sally Field has with the monster in this movie is very adorable. And you know what? It's a movie, and it's a live-action movie. When you watch Beauty and the Beast, it's a cartoon, so you don't really think about, like, this girl's basically shagging a giant dog. And in this movie, since it's live-action, you're like, how do you fucking fuck a fish monster or something like that? But they're tongue-in-cheek about it. There's a scene where Octavia Spencer is like, so, how do you guys do the thing? And she's, like, just gesturing what's going on. And I thought that was a very funny scene. If I had to do one criticism about this movie, is I feel like Octavia Spencer is typecast at this point. She's always going to be, like, sassy black woman who's friends with the white chick, who's just going to be, like, you did what? That kind of thing. Which is kind of getting old to me. But at the same time, look, Octavia Spencer, she's older now. She's not your conventional Hollywood beauty. It's probably the only type of role she can get. But felt like a bit of a generic character to me. I would say the same for Michael Shannon. I thought Michael Shannon was way too over the top in this movie. It kind of took me out of it. Like, I like dicks to a certain extent in my movies, but after a while it's just like, this guy, his hand is molding because he got his fingers stitched together, and his moldy finger, he like shoves it in his wife's face and there's like pus going. Like, this guy is such a dick! Like, I want to feel a bit of sympathy for the villain just so I can know where they're coming from, and I didn't really get that with this villain, I guess. He was just way too much of a dick. Kind of reminded me of Titanic in that way. How Billy Zane in that movie was just like so over the top dickish. But yeah, I thought everything about this movie was fantastic. The cinematography, few character flaws in my opinion, a few cartoony characters, which when you're Guillermo del Toro, you're kind of riding a fine line because you want this to feel like a fairy tale. You want there to be like the obvious good guy and the obvious bad guy. But at the same time, you are adapting this to a mature audience. So by having those simplistic two-dimensional characters, it doesn't really work for a grown-up audience. That said, this is the kind of movie I would love to show my kid. Listen, I'm not one for showing my kid Disney. I don't have kids, by the way. I'm talking in the future. But I'm not the kind of guy who will show my kid Disney movies. I would show them this, because this has a very nice message. Maybe I'd skip by the scene where she masturbates in the bathtub. Or, you know what, a kid won't understand what that is. I'll just say she's playing with a rubber duck or something. She's playing with her rubber duck. No! Don't say that, Paul. But, what am I doing? It's late. What time is it? Jeez. What time is it? 12:24 is when I started this review. That's like in the nighttime, by the way, not noon. But, yeah. Where was I going with this? I've talked to friends about this movie. The one scene they tend to not like is the scene where it turns into a song and dance number and it goes into black and white. Sally Field's character is able to sing. Personally, I didn't have a problem with that scene. I thought it was very cute and very charming. I thought Richard Jenkins' character was a little shoehorned in. His whole gay subplot wasn't really working for me. I didn't really see the point of having it in, although Richard Jenkins is a very good actor and a very charming dude. So in my head, I kind of give it a pass, but I feel like you could have kind of cut that out and it would have kind of felt the same. That's just in my opinion. You know what? Like, looking back on it too, it's about stigmatizing love, you know? The relationship Sally Field has with the fish monster is stigmatized, and Guillermo del Toro is trying to show that that's just how, like, Richard Jenkins' homosexuality is being stigmatized. I kind of get what he was going for, I guess, but it just wasn't really fitting. Maybe he could have done it in a different way so that it would have hit harder for me. But other than that, those few complaints I have with the movie, I thought this was an excellent film. Shape of Water, if you haven't seen it, watch it. Great soundtrack, great cinematography, great lead performance by Sally Field, great visual effects. Will make you feel all warm and gooey. Putting this on the love meter. This is an 80% on the love meter in my opinion. Very good movie. Not my favorite Guillermo del Toro movie, I would say. I haven't seen much of Guillermo del Toro's movies, not gonna lie. Especially his early catalog and his Spanish films, I haven't seen as much. I do prefer Hellboy 2. And obviously Hellboy 2 is not hitting the same feels as Shape of Water. But I just like seeing those fucking crazy creature designs in those movies. Those are awesome. But yeah, Shape of Water, if you haven't seen it, I recommend it. Go watch it!